Welcome to Let's Talk Automotive, and in this week's episode of How Things Work, we're going to take you through the impact that putting larger rims and tires on your car will have. Now, you'll know from previous episodes that when we've spoken about tires and aftermarket alloy rims, we've always mentioned that tires and rims are homologated with the vehicles, and that if you change your tires and rims, that there might well be insurance and even, in some instances, warranty and maintenance plans ramifications for you doing that. Now, to better explain the impact that changing your tires and rims will have on your car and its warranty and perhaps maintenance plan, I'm going to take you through the rule changes that are coming to Formula One in 2022 with respect to tires and rims. So as you may be aware, the current configuration of tires and rims on a Formula One car involve a 13-inch rim with a very high tire profile, and that's going to change to an 18-inch rim with a much lower tire profile. And there's a whole lot of implications that happen for a Formula One car, and the estimates are, by the way, that those cars are going to slow down by up to 2 seconds a lap. So for all of you that buy a car and rush out and put low profile, big rims on your cars, you need to understand that that perhaps is going to affect the overall ride and handling of the vehicle, and it's certainly going to slow it down, believe it or not. And there's a number of reasons why this happens, and this is why Formula One have implemented it into the rule changes for next year, because they physically want to slow the cars down. So the first big change that happens when we put on bigger tires and rims is, of course, the weight changes. So when we go from a smaller diameter rim and we put a larger diameter rim on, obviously there's more core material in that rim, and so the rim gets heavier. Now, there's two ways that impacts on the performance of the vehicle. The first is, from a linear point of view, it's simply more weight for the engine to have to accelerate the additional weight, which slows it down. But also there's the rotational effect that it has. So the more weight that we add to the rim, the further away from the center of rotation it becomes, the more the engine has to work in terms of rotating that tire as well. So we've got a double whammy when we put on larger diameter rims. The second impact that it has, of course, is that the rim being heavier means that the suspension is going to work harder. And there's two reasons why the suspension will work harder. The first is that, as you can imagine, with a 13-inch rim and a very high tire profile, most of the work that the suspension would normally do on a Formula One car is actually done by the profile of the tire. In fact, up to 80% of the suspension effect it resides in the tire of the Formula One car. So by making the tire profile smaller, there's less ability for the engineers to tweak their suspensions around the tires, and they're going to have to do a lot more setup and a lot more work on the suspension itself. The second thing is that a lot of the actual impact that the tire absorbs with its flexing is now lost. And that has to now be taken up by the suspension systems themselves. And that means that they're going to have to use heavier suspension systems. So once again, even outside of the rims and tires that are adding additional weight to the car, the suspension systems themselves become heavier. Another impact of changing the actual profile of the tire, especially on a Formula One car, is the fact that because the tire flexes, even on a nice smooth road, that constant changing in shape of the tire causes the airflow that goes over the tire to oscillate. And that creates and adds to the dirty airflow that the driver behind the Formula One car has to put up with. And so by reducing the actual profile of the tire, we lessen that oscillation effect. And in fact, there are deflectors that you'll see, or a cleaning blade that's going to be just above the front tire on the Formula One car, which further adds to cleaning up the airflow that moves to the back of the vehicle. So you can see that a lot of work has been done there. But here's the kicker for me. On a Formula One car, we are now going to have hubcaps or wheel covers that are actually going to be put on, because believe it or not, the actual shape of the alloy wheel itself adds to the aerodynamic inefficiency when the vehicle moves forward. So they're going to have these wheel covers that are going to be quite large that are placed on the wheels themselves. But there are going to be some cool things that they're going to do. So we can have LED indicators that are part of those wheel covers, and we'll be able to see some interesting things like the tyre wear performance, as well as the temperatures and pressures that those tyres are experiencing during a Formula One race. So some very cool tech that's going to be coming through. But ultimately, as you can see, by increasing the size of our rim and increasing the size, therefore, of the diameter of the tyre, adds weight to the vehicle, and that ultimately impacts on the harmonics and the design of the harmonics and the tuning of the suspension of the vehicle. And that is why tyres and rims are homologated with a vehicle, and if you change them, it can seriously impact the ride and handling characteristics of your car, and ultimately actually slows it down. So I know, obviously, from an aesthetics point of view, it looks great to stick in those 18, 19, 20-inch rims on your tyres, but ultimately you are compromising the performance of your vehicle. So there you have it. That's the impact that putting on larger rims and therefore tyres has on your vehicles. I hope you guys found that interesting, and we look forward to seeing you again next week on How Things Work.